Welcome to the Cricket8 podcast. I'm Jarrod Kimber. I'm here with the Rooster, Rob Barron. We may have another Rooster. We'll have some Rooster chat later on. I'm in Boston, so I apologise now. I'm in a very weird apartment complex where the Wi-Fi is either the best you've ever had or the worst you've ever had. Rob is, of course, buried in Middle England, as he always is. Let's go through the semi-finalists. Who's the most interesting semi-finalist, Rob?
New Zealand, probably.
Let's start with New Zealand then. Why will they lose to South Africa?
Death bowling is why they would lose to South Africa. So it's much better for New Zealand, despite their abject effort yesterday of calling the decision at the coin toss was where they lost that game yesterday. We will have a bat on a massively wearing pitch. So India obviously told New Zealand. So there was a thing, if you remember, Jarrod, a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half, we were talking about how India always win the toss whenever they need to. During the World Cup, it was like, well, India are obviously going to win this toss, so that's that. So there was lots of chat about how India were supposedly always getting the right calls in big tosses. Since then, they've lost 13 in a row tosses. So what they're doing now is they're just telling the opposing captain what to do. So that was the most obvious bat first pitch ever yesterday, and New Zealand didn't and basically died by spin. So New Zealand are much better off.
I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but from a betting perspective, it is quite funny how often India is the favourite to win the toss. So many people are convinced that all of cricket is fixed. They're just like, we're going to bet on the coin.
Yeah, and I think the people that have been betting on India to win the toss are no longer with us, really. I'm just going to have a look at the market now. You can lay it 1.98. And lay evens. People are asking for evens with tax. India to win the toss. Well done, everyone. Anyway, New Zealand, right?
Yes.
They are much better suited to pitches that are in for 250 than they are pitches that are in for 320. And that's why they're struggling against South Africa. I don't think there's a massive amount in it between these two teams because of South Africa's okay attack. And they've all been ill. Last game, they all had food poisoning, and Klassen's a bit injured, and Markram went off injured the other day. There's question marks around South Africa,
and they were sick for a week as well, weren't they?
Yeah, and they've just had to go at India's request, flying around on planes during the other game. So they're tired. They're ill. There's question marks everywhere. So it makes for a fascinating game, but it's at Lahore, and it's
I think it's quite interesting at the top because I think New Zealand's best chance is what they did against India, which is taking early wickets. I think that's their strength. Even more so now with Jamieson in the side. Jamieson, Henry with O'Rourke at first change is, without Lockie, the best that they can do, I think, at the moment. Without Lockie and Bolt, but you know what I mean. And so I see a lot of good signs for that. But the other side of that is, of course, that South Africa don't attack very much at the top. So you're not going to be in a situation where they're going to be reckless in the way that India was, right? So they have to really dismiss those players. So it could be a game that could be over very, very early on if New Zealand bowl first and don't take any wickets. Because as you said, the middle shouldn't bother South Africa. And the end is where South Africa's at their best, and it might be where New Zealand's at their worst.
I think that is probably the game because they showed yesterday that if Henry can get wickets up top, then fine, you're in the game. You're a chance. However, Henry's not very good at the death, and he's now their best option. And Jamieson is a cart horse at the death. He's useless. That's why he got paid £1 million to play in the IPL and just serve up absolute tripe. He's rubbish at the death. He's very good at the top. He's a really, really good Test match bowler, I think, Jamieson, if they could get him fit. But that's the game, isn't it? If they have any three of the 5 6-hitting guns knocking around in the last 10 overs, New Zealand are in huge trouble. What you need to do is bat first and hope the pitch wears like hell, and then it's so hard to come in and start smoking it. The trouble is, we're at Lahore, so that ain't going to happen.
No, I mean, as you said before, we're expecting runs. What's the current sort of run line in the first innings?
It's north of... Yeah, we do that. It's north of 300 already. It's like 308 or something. 310 for the first innings.
That's interesting to me because New Zealand, I'm not sure I'm backing New Zealand to score over 308.
Well, you can back them to score less than that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't
think
know who's batting first. Is my point. Do you
Yeah,
understand what I'm saying?
okay,
Like South
let's,
Africa, I'm expecting more, and New Zealand, I'm expecting less.
I can, if you talk about stuff, I can get you the 2 lines as they are now.
But you know what I mean. So I always find the first innings run line very interesting when you've got two teams who are very, very different, and in some ways they're similar, I suppose, in that they both sort of go slow and then try and score more, but they don't have the same kind of firepower with the New Zealand side as you do with South Africa. So they are a very different kind of side.
So it's
and not
good
all the
talking.
games have been high scoring either, have they?
It's 315 v 308 is what it is. So 315
Okay.
South Africa bat first, and 308 if it's New Zealand. But
Do you
if you
think there's
take in
7
on
runs
runs at this
difference in his
pitch,
batting lineup?
I understand why it is, because if South Africa bat first, the sky is higher, isn't it? The ceiling is higher. Because they can go absolutely bananas if it all goes right at the end. Whereas New Zealand going absolutely bananas feels unlikely. Phillips hasn't done anything yet, has he?
Yeah.
It's runs, mate.
Okay. So that's New Zealand. Just for this is just purely for social media. It's not even for the podcast. Could you give me a quick synopsis of how excited or upset you might have been when Kane Williamson was batting in the last game? You were in a swimming pool, weren't you? Weren't you listening to it on the radio or something? Were you still getting angry with how slow he was?
I was getting more angry because I was listening to it on the radio and I couldn't, watch 9 other screens at the same time. Yeah, I was listening to it on the radio as I was taking my daughter, various sporting pursuits yesterday, and just like it was sort of an excuse for Kane to be Kane, but it was one of those pitches where you couldn't let the run rate keep ticking up, and they did, and he kept getting dropped every 15 minutes, which is part of the innings as well. But it was like, well, I have to stick around, which is perfect. But I think Latham was the one that annoyed me the most because he came in and slowed it down, which is like, we got Kane at the other end slowing everybody else down. So no, that's a bad question, Micah Jermaine Stadler. Williamson should not be dropped from the New Zealand cricket team in ODIs because he's absolutely brilliant at them. And yesterday actually was a Kane Williamson, Tom Latham pitch. It was a nudge it around and get you 5 and over, but it wasn't nudge it around and get 2.5 and over. So you then have to get 7.5. That's when those pitches get difficult. They got in a mess. They got strangled, I think. It wasn't a great watch, even though I wasn't watching it live. I think Mitchell was appalling. Mitchell was the worst batsman on show yesterday.
I think he might have gone 9 balls without scoring at one stage. I actually thought that I understand the whole thing with Mitchell. He's like a semi-trailer, right? It takes a long time for him to get downhill and everything, so you want him to go in early. But Latham and Williamson was the ideal pairing for that early on, of just like, let's knock it around, let's get to 30 overs, and even if we need 120 runs off the last, or 130 runs off the last 20 overs, we'll be in a decent position to be able to do that with wickets in hand. Whereas Mitchell came in, you basically had the absolute worst possible scenario where he couldn't get the ball around, and then he went out without actually doing any damage as well. Just on South Africa, would you drop Lungi Ngidi?
I don't really see where they go if he is dropped. I don't think you play 2 spinners. You don't play 2 spinners at Lahore. That'd be suicide. Shamsi turning up for his first game, can't see it. Can you? They don't have any cover in the fast bowling. So it's Corbin Bosch, isn't it? Would be your alternative.
Who's not really a frontline bowler, and Tabray Shamsi, who's not really Tabray Shamsi at the moment.
So it's not Shamsi. It's definitely not him. The argument with Bosch is if it's a shootout on a road, 330 plays 330, then I'd rather have Bosch, I think, because he can smack you 30 with the bat, and Ngidi cannot do that. So on paper, there's not masses in it. Ngidi actually gets quite a lot of white ball wickets. We've spoken about him before, the Dwayne Bravo theory of getting wickets. If you bowl enough crap in the slot, if you bowl the odd slower one, eventually you get caught long on and caught long off. Also, when the rest of the attack is good and you're clearly the weak link, then you get everybody going after you. So he gets the wickets, but he goes for runs. But I think now the Giraffe has got really good, Marco Jansen. Like he's putting together good performances now, rather than being one good one, 2 terrible ones, 1 good one again. Like he's stringing it together. he looks like he's really good at cricket now, Janssen, and he's still young, so that's good. We know Rabada's good. We know Maharaj can do his thing. And then they got other people. You know, Mulder does stuff. He's okay. Like Mulder's been bowling all right actually since his injury. So
did you clean up on him the other day? Didn't you have him for most wickets?
Yeah, that was nice. I couldn't get enough on, but he was bigger than 7-1, I think it was. No, he was 7-1 before the match and 14-1 after somebody got 2 wickets early. That's a really good market to look out for. If anyone ever bets on top bowler live, the models can't hack it. They can't cope with it. So if somebody gets 2 early, as somebody always does, then they just go, well, that person's won. They've got 2 wickets in their first spell, so they've won, haven't they? And the amount of times the 2 for 20 in your first spell becomes 2 for 60. It's the people that can, particularly in ODIs, the way it is now, you want to be on somebody who bowls at the end in the first innings usually, when they're just trying to hoon everything, because the amount of overs where you just get 2 freebies at the end of ODIs is insane. So getting 2 wickets in an over is not a difficult thing if you're bowling in the 49th.
So on Ngidi, it's funny that you mentioned him with Dwayne Bravo, because I do think he's the same as Dwayne Bravo in that when he's getting maximum revolutions on his slow ball, he's going to take wickets because it drops so much. And if he's not doing that, he just goes for runs. And Shamsi's also an issue there. So I think that's quite interesting. What are the odds in that game at the moment? Do you know what we're staring at? Because
it's slight favourites, South Africa. What are they now?
South Africa
1.84.
South Africa didn't start the game against Australia as favourites, but are starting this game as favourites.
54% South Africa is your price right
How
now.
do you feel about that emotionally?
I think they're tiny favourites. I'd be a bit closer together if it was me. I have only had one argument with the match price. I thought Afghanistan were a bit big to beat England, but we said that before the competition. But the fact that South Africa were 1.88 to beat England when England definitely weren't going to try, that was the best bet of this competition. We spoke about it before the game, so we're not after timing, but that's the only one that I've had a serious argument with. It's like, what the hell is 1.88? There's no way England are going to try and win this game. The reason why, I mentioned this yesterday, the reason why India are the best team, other than the whole competition being rigged in their favour for various reasons, is yesterday was a dead rubber and they were 30 for 3 in quite tough Matt Henry conditions. And it was a dead rubber, right? They've already qualified. They've already decided exactly where they're going to play the game. They could have been on the golf course an hour later, basically. And if they were England, they definitely would have thrown the towel in at that point and gone, well, sod this. This is hard. Let's go home. You know, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether we win anyway. And they knuckled down and they thought, well, what is a good score? Aksar's going to come in and fight the fire. He was 4 off 15 or something, Aksar. How many cricketers in the world can be 4 off 15 now and not do stupid stuff? Imagine Liam Livingstone being 4 off 15 in that spot. Liam, can you help? We really need you. 4 off 15. No, of course he isn't. He would have been stumped 3 times in those 15 balls. Aksar knuckled down. Ia, who is possibly the most informed bat in ODI cricket right now. Ia, they just sucked up the pressure, chilled out, knocked it around, went, it's going to get easier. It's going to get easier. And it got easier. They got 250 and it was plenty, right? That's why India are the best team, because they've got something about them in terms of what they're meant to do during ODI matches. To go back to your original question, I don't have a massive problem with slight favourite South Africa. That feels okay to me.
I think it's a very good bet, and I'll tell you why. I kind of feel that if they bowl first, Janssen and Rabada will do well. So you unless Ngidi gets absolutely tanked by Ravindra, you're probably not going to lose a lot of money there. And if they bat first, chances are that New Zealand, unless Henry has an absolute day on what we expect to be a road, you expect South Africa to be 1 or 2 down for 100, 120, 150. So again, you're going to have your money in hand. So I think it's quite an interesting one. We got here from Sanchit, who says, why is it TalkSport covering the Champions Trophy games with live commentary? Because they don't have the rights. That's why they are on BBC. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll look at the game tomorrow, which is between 2 lesser-known countries, but we'll do our best to come up with some details on them. Cricket8 podcast, Jarrod and Rob.
Come to cricket8.com to spin the wheel as we start to launch our free fun cricket games. There are prizes to be won for the top spinners, and you can also stick around for all the live scorecards and all of our content.
Rob Barron, Jarrod Kimber. I'm the Jarrod Kimber one, Rob, in case you were confused. Okay.
You're Jarrod Kimber.
I've got a question for you.
Yep.
Would you lay India at the moment and say that the field is more likely to win this, or would you say that India is more likely to win this?
Good question. I think before the tournament, we'd done quite well with calling this competition. We were like, well, India are a bit too short, which if you'd laid them, you'd be in slightly bad shape, but not too bad. Laying 2.7, they're now 2.34, and they've bolted up in every game. Australia, South Africa, New Zealand were teams that we were positive on, and we were negative on the others. So all good, apart from Afghanistan. All good. Right now, this minute, I think I would lay India. The thing that's putting me off laying India is the utter contempt with which the ICC treats every other country and has treated every other country in this specific tournament. They're playing all the games in Lahore, which massively suits them. The fact that so we're playing on the deck tomorrow.
Lahore.
Sorry. Dubai massively suits them. Lahore
I was
does
like,
not
that
suit them.
is a news story.
Breaking news. They're playing they're playing every game at Dubai. And it really suits them. The pitch yesterday couldn't have suited them any better. Also, the other teams have had to fly around in aeroplanes while they've been lying in their beds or whatever. Like, all of that. It just feels like it's unfairly weighted towards India, and they're the best team. However, they're only a bad toss decision, not it doesn't matter who wins the toss, the other team have to make the decision, away from being in quite difficult shape. They're going to have to win 2 matches against 2 good cricket teams on a pitch where the toss might be absolutely massive by the time the final happens. Might be absolutely massive.
It's an interesting one, because if you look at Australia and the way that it kind of works there, like, Australia's best chance of winning is Travis Head. What's their second best chance of winning? Maxwell without Bumrah, perhaps?
So Maxwell can cause carnage to any cricket team, and let's face it,
Not when Bumrah's playing, he doesn't very often.
Yeah, we don't know which Maxwell if you get World Cup Maxwell for a bit. So they're playing against India in Dubai, which is a difficult assignment, but it was also a difficult assignment when they won the World Cup final. But Travis headed. But what we had then was India's intent was desperate, and they didn't know how to change the gears, wasn't it? We watched that game together. We watched it unfold. There are some pretty good bets knocking around tomorrow. A lot of it to do with the pitch. What is their best? If it's not Travis Head, it probably is Maxwell, or it's Smith and Labuschagne doing a better job of Kane, Williamson, and Tom Lathaming, is what it is. Is that they rotate well and keep the scoreboard moving if it's tough. We're expecting it to be tough here. Here's a funny one. So we know that India's opening partnership is Rohit and Gill. We know this. This is not going to be a surprise. And they are one of the best opening pairs in the history of white ball cricket. 30 times they've opened together. They have 1250 stands, 600 stands. That is nuts. And they're averaging 68 for the first wicket, which is nuts. And we know that Australia have got Travis Head and someone else. And we don't know who the someone else is right now. And it could be Fraser McGurk, in which case all in unders. And it could be Inglis. It could be Connolly. It probably won't be. If he plays, he'll be down the order. Could even be Carey. So they don't know who it is, or we don't know who it is. They probably do. The biggest bookmaker in the world thinks it's 50-50, 10 to 11 each, highest opening partnership. There's one team that is more likely to win that market than the other, and they're called India. So that's a very good bet. I quite like the idea of getting behind Ear to be good. He seems to be a guy that likes the deck. He is somebody that can change gears as well and has the sixes in his locker even on the difficult pitch. I mean, talk to me about him. How good is he at the moment?
I mean, he's almost as good as I've ever seen against spin in limited overs cricket. I think his average, is it me and Dad and Mike Hussey might have slightly higher averages against spin in ODI cricket from the
It's either him or
databases we have.
Zadran that's the best in the world at it.
Yeah, Zadran's pretty good as well. So I just think he's a fantastic player for this particular role. And some of the issues that you might have with him in T20 cricket don't really matter in this format. And people are banging the ball into the wicket and trying to bounce him. And he's now seen 1,000 bounces over the last couple of months. And he's still not a brilliant player of it, but he's a successful player of it.
Yeah, he's a lot better against the short ball than he was 12 months ago. And he had, and England gave him lots of practice in those. How many ODIs was it? I think he played 3 of them against England when they were just, a string of people bowling bouncers at him over and over again. So he had loads of practice, and he looked quite comfortable against it to me. Yeah, you can get him at like 5.5 stop India bat. That's okay. It's difficult to plough overs for anybody because we don't know how difficult the pitch is going to be. Do you know what I mean? It could be a tough way. It's much easier to make a case. I mean, going back to the other one, Rickleton's performance line is 30, for example, and he could easily get the gloves. Easily. Klassen's sick, or Klassen's been injured. And he's got ginger hair, and it's going to be a hot old day. Do you know what I mean? He could easily get the gloves, Rickleton. He got the gloves in the first game and got a couple of catches, in which case 30.5's an insane bet. And even if he doesn't, 30's not that many with the bat on that deck, and he's in good nick. So that's a good bet. But it's really hard to make an easy case to back somebody's overs. But his run line starting with a 2, which it does everywhere, 27, I think, for Ia, feels really low when you consider that he's got below 40 once, in this run of ODIs in the last 6 or 7 that he's played. He looks like he's not failing, and he just sort of wanders to 30, and then he sees where he is, and he seems to be
also,
yeah, go on.
Well, who's going to get him out? So if you're saying he has a weakness, it's not against spin where he's averaging 75 or 80, right? So we assume that he's fine against Zampa. I haven't looked at the direct matchup, but let's assume he's fine against Zampa. He's not going to have any problems with any of the part-timers. What's Australia's best middle over seam bowling option at the moment, right? Like, they don't really have one, right? Like, Alice is a very good defensive bowler, but he's probably not going to get your wicket. So it's a really weird one for me to have that. So India's 1.57. You're happy with that?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it isn't a bit shorter, given the Australia attack looks pretty toothless at the moment. Let's not forget that they conceded 350 against England. That is not a good sign of an attack. Yes, it was a road, but England are terrible.
Yep. I mean, they did well to stop that from being 380 or 400, which is what England probably should have scored. Yeah, I think if it was a normal wicket and we could predict what it was going to do a little bit more, I think India should start shorter. But because I agree with something that you said earlier, which is I think the toss is a little bit of a lottery in this particular game. And because of that, it probably means that India will not start quite as short as they should. The other thing that's quite interesting for me, it'd be interesting to see what you think about this, is if India go in with one specialist seamer, right, which is what I would do if I was them.
Yeah.
It does give Travis Head the opportunity to just whack the ball everywhere early on and score a lot of runs, and put India, like, completely change the whole game. Like, if Travis Head has a moment in the first 10, especially if it was the first 10 overs of the first innings, on what we think is a 250 to 260 wicket, maybe, right? Let's suggest that it's that kind of, and Australia are 80 for 1 after 10. That's a completely different game at that point, isn't it? And only having one specialist bowler, like Hardik Pandya's bowled really well, but when it comes down to it, there's a reason why he doesn't bowl his allocation all the time. It's not an accident.
Yeah, they managed to bowl 8 overs, or they went with 8 overs of pace yesterday on this deck. Yep. 4 for Hardik, 4 for Shami. That'll do you, lads. And then just roll through the spinners. And the thing is, on a worn pitch, and that was wearing further all the time against a team that were in knots, correct, bowl all your spinners. The temptation will be, well, we're back at the same place. They're on the pitch they played Pakistan on, where Pakistan laboured to 240 and India chased it, really easily. Who who knows how it's going to go here. I think India will go the 4 spinners route. I really do.
Definitely.
And just go, right, it's Shami and everybody else. And what Australia, so we spoke about this before, if they go Fraggle, which they could at the top, and just go, we're going to try and chaos our way to victory here. Because when Matt Short batted on one leg in the last game, it's so frightening. If you're like, oh, he's on one leg and he's swinging at everything. Yeah, but if you don't get that guy out, you're in big trouble. You're in huge trouble if you don't get the people that are swinging for the fences. And Fraser McGurk, there has never been a run of stats pointing to unders since in Australian ODI cricket since Aaron Finch was on the way out, and it was just unders every innings until he retires. This guy can't score a run, right? He hasn't scored a run for ages. He had a rubbish big bash apart from 190 odd. He was rubbish in all the others. He's been terrible in ODI since he started, apart from the funniest, I think, on debut when he was like massive swing, miss, massive swing, miss, massive swing, 6, out. Like, it all points to him being crap. But if they do roll the dice and go, right, it's McGurk and Travis Head against, it might be the absolute best time to bat in the match when they bat, if they bat first.
That's what I mean, yeah.
It might be there might be only 10 overs where you can mow through the line. And if Shami, who is a bit injured and he is old, if he rolls his arm over and the first over goes for 16, which it really can with those two batting, anyone can get hit for 16. They both hit Trent Bolt in the IPL and nobody else did. It really, and then you're like, oh dear, now what do we do? Because we don't want to go spin in the first 10 overs. We don't. What happens? So they might end up having to. It messes with the plans. All of a sudden, India are thinking, well, this bastard did it to us in the World Cup final, and it's happening again. And then the wheels could start falling off. That is a good route to victory. I think. Now that we've spoken about it, I think that might be a better idea than opening with English, which I was a big fan of before. What do you think?
I just think that India's such a better team than Australia, and their best chance of causing a victory is to upset what India want to do. And opening with Inglis or Carey, I think India's going to be like, okay, that's fine. We're more than happy with that. We know how these guys are going to bat. It's going to be normal and everything else. If you open with Fraser McGurk, you bring in the potential for him to be 40 off 12, right? And that completely changes this whole game from that moment forward, right? Like, so what are they? They're 1.57 to win this game at the moment. They're about evens at that point from then on in to win the game if Fraser McGurk works. Now, I'm not saying he's going to bat for a long time because he's not, but he doesn't need that many balls to work, right? He only needs 10 to 15 balls to change it. And if Head's not out at the other end, I would probably go with that. And I would go with it knowing that more likely than not, he makes no runs. Right?
Yes.
Like, I know that going in. I'm willing to take that chance in order to do that. But they do have other options too. They could move up one of those guys to open, as you said before, bring Aaron Hardy in, which gives them more bowling as well. So they do have other options. I'll tell you
one thing. Sorry, the Indian fielding might cost them at some point. So they have, this is the weakness of India right now. The wicketkeeper's rubbish. KL is a bad wicketkeeper. He was bad yesterday. He is almost always bad. So you want a good wicketkeeper on the tough pitches that are spinning and, stump it. Like Latham should have stumped Ear on 49 yesterday, and he jumped backwards instead of forwards. All his weight was distributed incorrectly, and he didn't affect the stumping. If Dhoni was behind the stumps there, Ear was out, India in big trouble. Wicket keeping is really important, and KL is very bad at it, right? He's consistently bad at it. They've decided to go with somebody that can't keep, as a lot of teams do now. But their fielding, they have at least 3 in the field who are rubbish. So if you've got Fraser McGurk and he smacks one to fine leg, which is Chakravarti, for example, it's not going to be a catch. Like, it's going to be at least one run. It's going to be dropped.
Did you see? There was one where, I can't remember who it was. He was chasing a ball to the boundary in the last game. And I almost texted you to go, Rob, I didn't know you were fielding for India. Like, my God. It looked like a Charlie Chaplin scene, right? Where you're just like, do you understand how legs work? Because you have to separate them in order to run. I love him as a bowler. And look, if he stays in this side, unless Travis Head does do something at the top, or Maxwell later on, Chakravarti, for me, is the best white ball bowler in the world at the moment, not named Jasper Bumrah. And so good luck playing him.
You need to back 14-1 Chakravarti man of the match, that's what you need to back, because he won
Tell me what
rather
to do.
easily yesterday with his 5-foot. Do it, and do it now. Do it in America. Get yourself down one of the many betting shops in Boston that are covering the Champions Trophy semi-final, and get as many dollars as you can at 14-1 on. They don't like betting, do they, the Americans? It's something I've found very strange.
It's all they do. I was at the NBA game yesterday. Everyone around me was talking about betting the entire game, but I don't think it's particularly. I don't even know how you bet in Boston. I'm not sure. And Bet365 didn't come up, for instance, whereas I know it does in other markets. I was on a VPN, obviously. It's still lost, although I almost stole a big win yesterday. Just this one on Krishna. He says, I heard the semis pitch is going to be the one used in the Pakistan game. Against New Zealand and Bangladesh was the same pitch, a lot more spinny. The one against Pakistan was flatter, 280 par. Also had 9 days of recovery. It's had 9 days of recovery, but it's had months and months of cricket. And it's also had people running over the top of it in the last game. If it was 280 last game, you're still probably looking at less than that in this game. But I don't think that was a particularly easy pitch to bat on either. It just wasn't as spinning.
Yeah, it was stodgy, wasn't it? And they got 240, and they may have got 260. That Pakistan team weren't going to get 280. You know, I mean, there's been a few teams that just haven't turned up for this competition. Pakistan, one of them. I would be surprised if India batted first and got 280. I'd think the game's over. And the only way Australia get that score at this ground is if they go carnage or if Travis Head. So you've got Head, Maxwell. If you throw Fraggle in as well, whilst I would be on under 18.5 for him, which is his run line, I would also be very wary that if they do manage, like you just said, if they manage to roll the chaos dice and it turns up carnage, then we have a really interesting game on our hands. But it's a good matchup, India against Australia, even without the Australian bowlers. I think the fact that Australia don't have any bowlers is kind of negated by the fact that India don't have Bumrah. It's just how spinny is it going to be? Because if it's really spinny, then India are going to destroy him.
Yeah, you would think so.
Conway for Phillips. Come on, Phillips isn't going anywhere. Triple stroke.
This is an interesting one, triple stroke, because let's imagine you do that in this game. This is the game where they need fast scorers, and Conway has not been scoring fast for a long period of time. I think this is a more interesting one going ahead for the next game, right? Like if they do make it back to Dubai, I think that's quite interesting at that point, that conversation. I still wouldn't do it, but I can see why we're going there. Genie's put in a super chat, so thank you to him, but he hasn't. I can't actually see any of his chats.
Could be Conway for Mitchell, you know. They could sack Mitchell off after that performance yesterday and go back to Conway and drop Ravindra down a bit.
So when Mitchell wasn't playing in the other game, we knew he was sick. Was he injured? I think he was sick in that game, and he wasn't playing. And I was like, I'm not too worried for New Zealand. He's just not batting. Darryl Mitchell, 18 months to 2 years ago, fine. This Darryl Mitchell is not in that form anymore, and people have worked out how to bowl to him a little bit better, and he's no longer smashing the ball around all the way through. So, yeah, it's very different. A couple of other chats that I think are interesting. Amy is very upset that I have ranked Brian Lara higher than Hashim Amla. So we did this thing. You would have actually loved to be involved in it. We looked at on my podcast the 64 best ODI batters of all time, and we did a blind seeding. So that I think Rohit went out in the first round or something because he was up against Sachin or Viv or something ridiculous. We did blind seeding, and then you basically on the fly had to work out where these players went. And Amy was very upset that I picked Lara over Hashim Amla. And you can see here in the comments, he's like, yeah, I saw your ODI greatest batters. It was full of cognitive bias and irrelevant criteria. And yes, I was not annoyed. He's very not annoyed because this is the second time he's found me on a live to tell me how not annoyed he is as well. But one of the things that is really important is, and a couple of people have got really upset at this recently. They'll say things like, oh, you didn't have Virat Kohli at number one, and he's got this many runs and this many hundreds. I'm like, you do understand that people didn't make as many hundreds and as many runs in the old days. And if you had those older players playing in this period, and that's where you look at, when you look at Lara's numbers, I think he averages 40 with a strike rate of whatever it was for his era. It's not particularly high. But when you transfer those numbers
Yeah.
modern cricket, they suddenly look really, really good. And then a player like Hashim Amla, his numbers are partly from the modern period. So his numbers don't get the same boost. In fact, I'm pretty sure when we did it, Maxwell actually gets a slight reduction on his numbers, which I know you would be annoyed at personally. It doesn't matter. His numbers are still really good. But that's what we were trying to do, is we were trying to normalize this stuff. But you also have to remember, Amy, when you're totally not annoyed at all and that you're not being triggered by the one thing I said in an hour-long podcast where I had to blind rank ODI players without any numbers in front of me, right? I didn't even know what show we were doing before we got on. The other thing that you need to remember is that there are different kinds of things that you need to look at when you're looking at the greatest ODI players of all time. If you just look at one or two different things, you're never going to get this right. But also, it's just possible that some people have different ways of looking at things than you. I mean, I think you just need to go touch some grass, mate. I think you've gone a little bit crazy there. Is there anything else you've got, Rob, that you wanted to talk? Oh wait, we got another super chat from Soham who says, "Can we make this the last Champions Trophy?" We've made it.
No.
It's been the last Champions Trophy 3 times.
No, we can't.
The Champions Trophy has been cancelled 3 times, everyone.
The trouble is, I fear for the Champions Trophy, even though I love it, because there's 2 ways, or there's 2 lines that the ICC could go down after this, and both of them lead to it not happening again. One is India win in the rigged tournament where they fixed it so that India definitely win. And then they go, well, India have won it. India are the holders forever. So that's the end of that. Or India don't win it, even though they've rigged it entirely in favour of India. And they go, well, there's no point in having that tournament. No one cares about it anyway. It's rubbish. So it's difficult. You might get your wish, Soham, but I'm not with you. I absolutely love the Champions Trophy. Allow me to talk about Hashim Amla and AB de Villiers, so I would imagine we're in the conversation. This
AB, so the top 4... I don't know where Hashim Amla came, actually.
Can't
I think he went pretty far. I think he went pretty high. I could be wrong. I could be wrong 50, on that. But,
did he even average 50 in ODIs?
48, Hashim? 49.
Okay.
I'm sure Amy will know. I think he's got it tattooed on his forehead.
He's no Ryan Tenduskarta, is he?
Yeah.
Okay, Tenduskarta's numbers don't count, but Shubman Gill's do, and he's averaging a lot more than that.
The problem with Shubman Gill was he just hasn't played enough cricket at the moment.
50 ODIs, I think. And he will never get to be an ODI great because they just don't play it anymore, I think.
Probably true.
The South Africa, West Indies, when they got 440, whatever it was. So that would have been the biggest win of my life by an absolute mile on top batsman. I was sat there all day, and they changed the rules. Do you remember the power play was at the end? You could get absolutely loads.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
No, it was. You got the 5 overs
when you wanted them. Yeah.
But it was the extra man out. It was total utter mayhem carnage at the end. And I think Jason Holder's figures that day, it was like his first 5 overs went for 4 and over, and his last 4 overs went for 24 and over or something. It was like when you've got those West Indies death bowlers. Dwayne Smith was bowling. Suleiman Ben was in it. Jerome Taylor bowled, went for 100 or something. Anyway, that day I was on, when Amla was on, like, Riley Rosso got 100 that day. Everyone's forgotten that.
Yeah.
When they were on maybe 150 for naught, the models at various bookies basically decided that nobody else could possibly win top batsman because it would have meant that someone has to come in and go bananas. But they had AB de Villiers, and AB de Villiers was listed at 5 or 6 behind Faf and JP Duminy or whatever it was back then. And so the models were like 100 to 1 de Villiers. I'm like, okay, as much as I can have. And then they score a 4, 125 to 1 de Villiers. Okay, as much as I can have. 150 to 1. Do you know what I mean? I'm there going, well, I've got an account where I'm allowed to win $5,000 every time I have a bet on top batsman, but I've had about 20 bets on him to be top batsman. I had him for like, really an actual life changer at the time. And Rosso got out, and de Villiers I'm looking at it now, so I am cheating with the numbers. I am looking at it, but de Villiers faced 44 balls, right?
Yep.
Hashim Amla faced 142 balls, and at the start of the last over, where I don't think you've ever really seen me sweat when it comes to gambling. Like I've never been.
I've never seen you on
upset.
a really big bet. No.
Yeah, or on like I've never like wildly like I cheer a bit and I get a bit grumpy if people drop catches or whatever, but I'm pretty even. But emotionally, I was having I was on one that day, thinking, what if he actually does it? And with an over to go, Andre Russell bowling, AB had reeled him in. Right, he had reeled Amla in from being 100 behind or 130 behind or something, and he had got to 5 runs behind, 1 over to go. Amla's on strike, and I'm like, oh, you know what to do here, Hashim. Take the single first ball, and I'm like this. He just needs to hit the ball once. He'd scored like 80 off his last 15 balls or something ridiculous. I'm like, just hit one more, and it's done. We're in, and he got out, and I was so upset. So I'll never forget that best innings ever. And he was really sick that day, AB, as well. They were like, oh, do you want to have a go? He was like lying down in a dark room feeling with a migraine or something, and he was like, oh yeah, go on, I'll have a swing. And apparently he just said, I'm just going to swing at every ball, see how we get on. 140 something off 44, but yeah, about 5 runs too few. Leave it there on a good one.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a couple more chats and we'll finish up, but very quickly. Ami's coming back because he can't help himself. You're giving wrong information about Lara's adjusted numbers. I never said Lara's adjusted numbers. I was trying to guess his overall numbers. Ami, it's really important you know that in an hour-long podcast, I had to talk about 64 different cricketers without any numbers in front of me. I didn't have access to anyone's numbers. And you just look, all I was doing is writing down the name of the person I thought was slightly better and slightly worse. But there's a reason I pulled this up. You said Amla played on the toughest conditions ever for a batter. The toughest conditions ever in ODI cricket were before Amla ever played. If you go back, especially in the days when they used a red ball, if you're going to have a conversation with me about cricket, you need to know something about the game. But please, never have a conversation with me about cricket ever again. Mika's got a really...
congratulations for rattling Jarrod, by the way. You've clearly got to him, even though you're definitely not annoyed by anything. You've done something that I can't do, which is wind the man up. So keep firing him in, please.
Micah says, if New Zealand needs to score fast, wouldn't Chapman for Mitchell be better? Chapman's a really interesting one, isn't it? We've been talking about that for a long period of time, about how well he's done against Pakistan, in Pakistan, and everything else. Gives them a little bit more bowling. I'm not sure he's a better bowler than Rachin Ravindra, but he's a slightly different kind of left-arm finger spinner if they wanted it. How do you feel about this?
I don't like his bowling. I think it's one of those...
No one likes his bowling.
Very much like Sam Curran. It's easy to get a lot better at cricket when you're not playing. Like Sam Curran has had a whale of a Champions Trophy. Like he's an absolute stunner of a tournament.
Okay, just quick one. Who's had a better Champions Trophy, Sam Curran or Sri Lanka?
Yeah, great call. Probably Sri Lanka. Like Sri Lanka are awesome at cricket now again, aren't they?
Yep.
I think Chapman for Mitchell, if it wasn't where it is, maybe. Like, if Mitchell's your man, you got to back him here, haven't you? You got to back him in this one.
I kind of get that.
And just say, right, try and hit that sight screen, please, because that's what he likes to do. It would be tough to bring in Chapman right now, but they do have a bit of a headache. I think some of it is illness and injury force, but so do South Africa. So we've got some really interesting cricket in the world's best format, ODI cricket, over the next few days.
Last one from Pranav, which is interesting. Why is Ashton Agar not here? He would be handy. Australia defeated India and Chennai with no Hazelwood Cummins in 2023 before the World Cup. I'm not worried about that at all. Ashton Agar's not playing for Australia because they don't think he's very good at cricket. And sometimes it's worth remembering we think of players in a slightly different way than the team does. Their issue is they don't think he's a better spinner than Zampa or Maxwell. So they think in their side he would be their third best spinner. And so why would you pick someone to be your third best spinner if they're also not a particularly good bat, right? Like, he's a number 8 really at international level. I know that there has been rumours occasionally of him playing number 7 consistently. He's not good enough to bat at number 7. So he's a number 8. So you're not getting a lot out of his batting, and they don't think a lot out of his bowling. If they did, last World Cup and this Champions Trophy would have been part of their plans, but they don't rate him very highly. Rob rates him really. Rob told me before, thought Ashton Agar might be the best cricketer in the world. He actually specifically said better than Virat Kohli. Anyway, that's all we have time for here on the Cricket 8 podcast. Thank you to everyone for putting in comments and everything else. Like and subscribe. The Cricket 8 channel, or the website, I should say, is undergoing some changes shortly. And so we'll be talking about those. I don't know why Rob took his hat off while we were still recording.
That's what I do.
Unprofessional.
That's what I do.
Unprofessional. But we will see you again next time for more on the Cricket 8 podcast.
Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details that tell you who is actually in front in the game.